you very much. I feel like I've got a high bar there already set. Thank you and welcome to this session this afternoon. It's great to see you all here. I'm going to start with a quote. If you don't invest 5% of your marketing budget on research, then you don't know what you're doing. Now, that's not an instruction from me. It's a quote from one of my columnists, Mark Ritson, and I'm sure some of you are familiar with. Now, whether or not he's got it right with the 5%, I don't know, as that depends on the size of your brand and obviously your budget. But the point is, if the purpose of marketing, and I'm possibly going to misquote the Chartered Institute of Marketing here, is to identify and serve customer needs in a profitable way, then it's probably a good idea that you spend a little bit of time, money, and energy in finding out what your prospective customers think and feel. It's not a universally, seemingly not universal, the industry in agreement in that. If you look at the IPA's Bellwether report, which does canvass both B2B and B2C, then market research spend has been in decline for many, many years. Now, I think in this session, what I aim to do anyway is to demonstrate the value and the virtues of investing in market research, how it can meet challenges and how it can deliver business outcomes. And we're going to do that by telling the details or offering you the details of an award-winning story. ReallyB2B worked with Arden University on a recent B2B campaign which went on to win a B2B marketing award for, this is quite a mouthful, bear with me, Best Corporate Decision Maker Targeted Campaign. And it most importantly, not just won awards, but it went on to deliver great results. And I have two of the key architects behind that with me today to help tell that story. Caroline Evans, who's Corporate Strategy Director at Arden University, and Clare Rhodes, Account Director at ReallyB2B. And they're going to unpack the activity and explain the part that audience research played. Welcome both.
Thank you.
Now let me begin with you, Caroline. Let's have a little bit of a scene setter. Tell us a little bit about Arden first. What was your particular challenge when you began working with ReallyB2B, and what were the objectives that you set?
I think first of all it's worth saying that you don't have a good relationship with your agency unless you spontaneously start turning up in matching yellow trousers to events. Thank you, Russell. So Arden University, we're a disruptor university. We have been around since 1990 as a provider of online learning, and we got degree awarding powers about 5 years ago. We deliver flexible degrees to time-poor working adults through a combination of innovative learning technology and targeted blended learning. We're a £170 million business. We have 21,000 students, but the vast majority of that revenue and those learners are on the B2C side. They are individual learners. My remit when I was brought in was to pivot that to a B2B business through the degree apprenticeship provision. So we had a great presence in the B2C market, and we had some success in penetrating on the B2B side. But I'd come from a competitor. I knew how much potential there was, and that we could exponentially grow our numbers. We have a great internal marketing team, but they're entirely focused on B2C provision and that reach. So we really needed to do something different. I knew our target needed to be fewer, higher value clients for the depth of relationship and the sales efficiency that we needed to bring. So we started conversations with ReallyB2B, and it was clear that they could position us where we needed to be in the corporate learning and degree apprenticeship space with relevant, compelling and resonant messaging that was going to hit our target audience. So reaching the right decision makers through that overall campaign.
Did you do much by way of research at all before you started working with ReallyB2B?
So we knew the power of research. We do a lot of research again through our B2C side, but it's the critical difference there between your end user and your buyer being the same person, and in the B2B space where your end user and your buyer are different individuals. And we just didn't have that capacity in-house. So we needed someone with all the experience that they could bring to us and bring the insights and really understand that market and do it much more quickly than we would have done. We just didn't have the capacity as much as anything to do that internally when so much of our business was focused on the B2C approach.
So we've heard about the challenge, Claire. Let's move on to the process. So what were the first steps that you guys took when starting the work?
So, hello everybody. I'll just kind of scene set about who we are just a little minute before I pop into the detail of the process. So, we are a marketing solutions agency and we help brands, much like Arden, break into that B2B space, connect them with the audience in the right way, through the right channels. So then you guys, or Arden in this case, can maximise on the potential sales opportunities and get that growth that they needed. So, you know, whether it's generating leads, demand gen, ABM, you know, we're basically taking our knowledge and sharing that with our clients like Arden to you know, through research, through strategy, through creative and content, and out the back to deliver with data to get those results, to achieve those as you've seen on the slides, you know, kind of the goals and meet those objectives. So for many years we've done research and we've always felt it really, really important, and over time we've kind of honed those skills, and then we were working with Arden enabled us to then put those back into use. So initially we took the kind of quite a comprehensive analysis of like the market, kind of the key, talking to the audiences, looking at the key challenges for HR and learning development professionals. Obviously their target audience. This at a time, I just want to sort of point out this, at this moment in time we were like in the middle of a kind of kind of towards the end of the pandemic, so we'd done some research up front pre-COVID, but we were also kind of needing to re-establish, okay, is the situation still the same now? A lot has changed for everybody, and we knew that there were a lot of companies, you know, a lot of universities out there that were having to pivot themselves, much like Arden, to offer that more blended learning approach because of obviously the situation that the pandemic had put us in. So we knew we needed to really understand what the employers needed from a learning service, you know, that learning offering for their employees. So it was really, really key. So we, you know, identifying the USPs for Arden, what was their proposition, you know, kind of looking at other blended solution providers, you know, kind of almost just kind of scanning that market to identify where that white space was, that we could then create that big idea, get that campaign proposition and take Arden out to market to really share the skills that they have.
And that's the first stage of market orientation, but let's hone in a little bit on the work you did on decision makers. Talk to us about how you gathered the information on those that you were targeting, or that established those that you were targeting.
Yeah, so we took, as you probably see on the slide, there was a few different methods that we took part in. So it's really, really key to get a good representation across the market where possible. So we, within our discovery session or discovery phase, we talked initially to key stakeholders within the Arden University themselves to understand what they deemed their strengths and weaknesses, to understand their USPs, what were the common objections that they were facing, you know, kind of to really hear it from the horse's mouth, but also externally. So we also took the time to do a series of interviews to talk to the learning and development professionals that we were wanting to target, you know, so likes of Auto Trader, Mars, those key businesses. So again, we could really kind of hear from the people that actually we're trying to sell to, we could hear their positioning, what were their challenges, what were their pain points that we needed to help Arden how do we help them, and how do we help position Arden to answer those pain points and challenges that they had. So it was really, really key that we took the time to discover all of that insight and take, some really good nuggets of information from, and some things it's not new, nothing new, but you can't really assume. And so that by taking that process of talking to directly, overlaying then sort of desk research, the analysis with the competitors, the gap analysis, really highlighting what the HR and professionals needed, but we also added in an element of disc profiling on top of that, so then we could consolidate all of those learnings and to create kind of an in-depth picture of our prospective audience.
Just pausing there on disc profiling for the benefit of anybody that doesn't know, and I certainly don't. What's involved in disc profiling? How did you apply it to this particular challenge?
So disc profiling is something that we at ReallyB2B have worked with. It's a tool we've worked with for a long time. So for us, it didn't really feel very new, but it's a really useful tool that can kind of be overlooked. So we use it to kind of overlay to enable us to segment more detailedly for the relevant target audience. So through the discovery phase, obviously we discovered lots of different insights, but then we took those insights and the actual target audience that we, the data, almost the brief that we had from Arden, and we overlaid this disc profiling, which essentially categorises 4 personalities, as you can see on the slide. So then we also kind of knew how, it enabled us to look and kind of how people like to digest the information, how they like to be spoken to, where they like to be targeted. So it's all this additional kind of elements that we could then put towards our segmentation. So it enabled us to segment. So we segmented in via 3. So we had a primary, secondary, and influencer segmentation groups. Don't forget your influencers, by the way, they're really, really important. We did see some of our strongest results from that influencer category, but it enabled us to kind of understand that our primary audience were ultimately I profiles, so the influencer, so don't get the two confused, but they are the more softly conversational, kind of softly approach, whereas the sort of secondary, so the influencer group, they were the D profiles. So they were your CEOs, the people. If there wasn't a learn and development partner or people manager, then they were the people that we would potentially talk to. They were much more dominant, hard hitting, needed the bullet points, didn't want to mess around with the fluffy copy. So all of this information and insight kind of all gathered together built up a picture of kind of what our strategy was to be and how we were to talk to these different groups of audiences during the campaign, and also kind of fed into the sorts of content that we would then develop for the campaign.
And Caroline, why did this approach resonate with you in particular?
Yeah. Right from the beginning, we obviously went through a full tender process, procurement process to identify the agency we wanted to work with. And quite frustratingly, I found that we were met with a standard response of, oh, we know you, we know your industry, we know your organisation, you're an HEI, we've worked with other HEIs, higher education institution. I know everybody thinks their organisation is unique, but we are a profit-making university. We are not research-led. And being met with a lot of organisations saying, we've worked with FE, we get you. We've worked with independent training providers, we worked with HEIs, this is our solution. Actually quite frustrating as a client because we are none of those things. So it was very refreshing to have a conversation with an agency that said, we will work to understand you and your market. And it was a surprisingly different approach. So this idea of segmenting our audience, really understanding, and the depth of research was interesting in and of itself, but it also had the additional benefit that engagement with stakeholders through the research process gave a lot of credibility to what we were doing. And in terms of my internal PR for the project and for the spend and for what I was doing with my bit of the university was hugely valuable. And also, we are a university, so an evidence-based approach and being able to demonstrate the output of research was a huge win to us as well. So having all of that package together before we even got to the results was hugely valuable for us. And then it obviously delivered on that as we went through as well.
So you've done your diagnosis, you've done your orientation, you've established your segments, and you've worked out how you're going to target. So how does all of this manifest itself, or how did all of this manifest itself in terms of the output, the marketing communications? Caroline first.
So the other thing that the approach gave is actually we quickly developed a lot of trust in Really, and like I say, that credibility was there. So we really took our steer from then. We chose interactive content because we needed something that we knew would increase engagement amongst the time-poor decision makers. We had two pieces of interactive content, so the quiz and an ebook. The quiz was the top of the funnel piece, so it delivered hard-hitting messaging, key insights on the benefits of apprenticeship learning and our Arden's proposition in a way that kept the user really engaged. The ebook provided a perfect blend of information for those interested in reading more about it, and it was all zipped up. So it could be dropped down by the user for them to dig into in more depth. That was really important for us because we are a digital learning provider. So having engaging digital content was a key part of it from the outset. So we could effectively show who we are and what we were about right from the beginning of that first contact with the potential buyer.
And this gamification, the interactive element, was that new for you?
I think it was for us. I mean, in reality, everything was new to us on the B2B side. So we were breaking into that market. But I think there's a real difference in terms of the quality of content that you need to produce into a B2B space. For B2C, it's a much less complex decision-making process for our individual students who are personally vested in that process. So certainly having that richer content was massively valuable to us just in gaining and retaining interest, and then being able to see the back end of that as well, being able to have the data that I think we'll share a little bit later around the length of engagement and the click-throughs and all the other data that we had, hugely important for us to be able to see who was engaging and how.
And it also enabled us to kind of work to further our relationship and deepen our relationship in terms of obviously you've seen like the different types of content and the different sort of channels that we took, but we also sort of, part of that content was also case studies that we created with in partnership with Arden, kind of so the audience could see for themselves what the employees got out of their learning experience with Arden. So it was a mixture of not only that interaction, showing their digital expertise, but also that kind of actual evidence base further with the case studies that we'd collaboratively developed really for the purpose of this campaign. And then it enabled all of this, we want to get as much out of the use of this, what we're creating for them, as possible. We don't just want it to appear once on LinkedIn or once on an email. So it enabled Arden to then take this, have it within their hub, within their website, share it further, and use for future content. So it's always making sure that there is that longevity in what we do as well. So.
Okay, so the important part is how it all worked out.
Yeah.
The success of an award-winning campaign, indeed any campaign, is obviously in its effectiveness and in driving business outcomes. Without arching and possibly doing myself permanent damage, I can't see that up there, but if we can can walk us through, Caroline, how it all fared.
Yeah, well, I'm going to go straight to the bit that really matters as the commercial director responsible, and that's the 1.3 million in the pipeline. So the actual revenue results that we could see coming through were critical. Like I said, there's an awful lot of data there that we could, really useful data in terms of looking at what marketing activity worked, what engaged with our buyers and what didn't. And that's what we can take forward into our own internal future activity, now that we have that understanding of what hits the mark and what doesn't. But, you know, the money is hugely important, but also the penetration it gave us into our target sectors. So we've got, you know, you can see up there, we've got Marriott, Wayfair, David Lloyd, Diageo, Mighty, lots of different broad sector organisations that we gained access to, many of whom have come through as buying clients. And again, all of that understanding that we've got around those different sectors, we take forward, as you know, my BD team and my internal marketing people will take forward into our next bout of activity. So that's been really the big difference for me. It's a springboard for what we can do next, as well as putting everything into that actual money into the pipeline. We've grown over, I mean, when I joined, we were £250,000 in revenue. We'll be 8 million next year. So we've grown hugely in the last 3.5, 4 years. And we will be the #1 provider in each of our product sets next financial year. So the difference for me is night and day, but I think the critical part is we know what to do much more than we did before we started, and that then becomes self-sustaining and much more scalable than it ever would have been.
Clare, I said at the beginning the role that investment in research can and indeed does play. We've seen that demonstrated in an incredibly effective way in this particular case. I mean, what would be your take on the role that audience research played in what it has been a very successful piece of activity?
It almost speaks for itself, really, in terms of the results. But I think, you know, without being really obvious, it's really, really important. I think sometimes we take, as marketeers, can take it for granted that we think we know what the prospect or the audience wants and needs, but actually we don't until we start to talk to them about, you know, kind of more relevant, until we start to get into the nitty-gritty. And also, as marketeers, it's harder for us to kind of potentially sell in that research because it's a big chunk of money up front and it's an investment, and, you know, kind of the client isn't always sure what they'll get out the back of it. But absolutely, research, without a shadow of a doubt, it enables us to properly understand the audience, to properly target them, and to properly talk to them one-to-one on their personal level, and really understand what makes them tick and what kind of, you know, what issues they get up every morning facing that we can help them solve with the likes of, you know, of Arden from a learn and development perspective. But yeah, it's crucial, and that investment, I think sometimes we don't, you know, sometimes clients don't appreciate actually what is involved to make a truly successful campaign. And as you can see, doing the research, spending the time up front has definitely proved dividends, you know, for Arden, from not only from a campaign and awareness point of view, hitting those objectives, but also like Caroline said, for the future and how it steers her teams internally moving forward. So, you know, for me, that's a win.
Well, it's a great testament to the value and virtues of research. I mean, to the point that you just made, there's a hell of a lot of assumptions, a lot of bias that goes into decisions. I'm horrified by the fact that decisions, money, budgets are signed off based upon, I don't even know what. And in the data age, the explosion of data means that a lot of brands, B2B and B2C, are going around hoovering up data and using it without applying any kind of forensic analysis to turn it into insight. Well, I'll get off my soapbox for a second. Does anybody have any questions about anything that they've heard? That lady there was the first hand that I saw up, so I'm going to go there. Thank you.
Hi there, that was great presentation, thank you. I'd love to know more about the disc profiling element of it and how you did that. Was it questionnaire surveys with your target audience, or was it more using a tool like Crystal Rhodes or something like that to scrape social profiles?
It's more using the tool, so it's taking the information that we've gleaned from, all the insight that we've gathered, and it's a sort of a tool that we then kind of use that kind of overlays over that really, and kind of builds up a picture. So it's it's asking certain questions. Who are these audience? What are these people? What do they do? Where they? And then builds you kind of ultimately to, are they an influencer? Are they a dominant, etc. Depending on that criteria within that tool. So it is available out there. It's not anything that we've done, unfortunately.
If you add a bit more colour, it's an incredibly useful tool.
Yeah.
It doesn't get used enough. And Russell's made a brilliant point around the carnage of just taking data and doing forensic science investigation. And there's a product called Crystal Rhodes, which I'm not pitch, but it will go and do an analysis on your LinkedIn profile, and it will match you to disc, and it will say, well, you're the kind of person who likes your messaging in this way. So if we just take the four of us here, you might like really direct, more passive, much more informative, etc. It's a really helpful tool right there. Just to
So we've used it. It's like a bit of a question. There's a couple of different levels to it. There's the integrating the Crystal Nose. There's we've surveyed ourselves within the office. What type of person are you? How do you like to digest your information, etc. So it's a really good tool.
I think that gentleman in the black shirt had a question.
Hi there, excellent presentation. I'm Phil Clark, running content consultancy. I'm interested as to the result of that insight, whether it fed back to your core proposition in terms of what you are actually providing to the B2B customers.
In terms of the product?
Yeah, did it evolve? Did it?
Well, not really. It's quite difficult to change a degree on the back of. I think to a certain extent, indirectly it probably has, because opening up more conversations with more organisation has helped us to understand what they need. So it's not a direct, we found out this, so we changed to this. But by opening the door and critically the depth of partnerships, so this idea of fewer, higher value clients, that's about getting the revenue in, it's about the sales efficiency. But when you are a transactional supplier, you can't have that relationship with your client where you go, well, will you consult on our next program development, or will you become an external verifier for our next validation process, university speak. But you can, when you've got 10 learners with them, or when you've got a 5-year contract signed with them, they then become your partners, and you can work with them in a much more effective way, and that informs the product. So it's a slow process because of the nature of what we do, but there is no doubt that opening up the doors and developing our understanding and our credibility with clients means we're able to build a better product going forward. Yeah.
There's a question right at the front there.
Hi. I just wanted to ask if you were able to share, talked about the interactive ebook. Did you create that yourself, or did you just use like an off-the-shelf kind of tool?
No, we create that ourselves. So as part of what we do create content, or we design and create. So that particular piece was actually built specifically for within Arden's website. So it was quite, we build ebooks that we can create and make interactive, and we send them out via email, or we place them on a hub, etc. But this one was specifically built within Arden's your website and your hub, so it was quite unique to Arden and how we interacted, and how we wanted it to be fully interactive in terms of that kind of, not just you can click on a link in a PDF element. We wanted it to be absolutely engaging, the kind of, you could click through the tabs, you could, the copy would expand or close, etc., depending on. So it was much more about kind of the user experience than about what necessarily the content was, because we wanted to make sure that they digested that content, because we knew they were time poor and they, kind of didn't have much. And it's also then a really good tool for Arden to point to and continue to use. So.
Right, I think we've got time for one or two more questions.
Hello, so I'm Daisy, I actually work in the ReallyB2B team, so I'm probably playing devil's advocate here, sorry guys.
Thanks.
But to anyone in the audience who's struggling to get sign-off for budgets for market research, what's like a piece of advice that you could give them to help push that through?
Oh.
Are you going to look at me for that?
Yeah. Over to you. You like to get signed off.
I mean, you just give me a call. It's fine. We can have a chat. It's not a problem. It's one of those things that once you've experienced it, you understand the benefit of it, and it becomes such a no-brainer, because it's so frustrating to repeatedly have conversations with. And I think all clients have done it. Conversations with agencies, and you just feel like you're repeating yourself time and time and time again, and you're not being listened to. And I'm sorry, but it really does happen. And having a sort of evidence bank that supports what you're trying to say or contradicts it, doesn't matter, is really helpful. It takes it out of your personal opinion side of things. So yeah, it's really difficult to. I guess the evidence speaks for itself to a certain extent, and look at the case studies. Yeah.
I suppose what's key is articulating it in terms of business outcomes,
Yeah.
as opposed to marketing buzzwords.
Yeah.
I suppose. Yeah. Sorry.
Oh no, I was just going to say, and credit your buyers with the intelligence that they have. They are clever grown-ups in organisations. Don't make the assumption that you know what they want or what their organisations are. Curiosity is absolutely everything, I think. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Kind of common sense thinking.
Yeah.
Somewhere, by the sounds of things. Any more questions out there? Okay, well I'll round it off with a question for each of you. If there's one little piece of advice that you want to impart from what you've learned on this particular project, what would that be? What would you take away and into your next initiative?
Is that the power of curiosity? Assume your assumptions are wrong.
That will literally fit onto a t-shirt.
Yeah, there we go.
It won't be a bestseller, but it will fit onto a t-shirt. Claire?
Mine's not quite as in-depth as that, but I guess listening. Again, don't assume, listen to what's being said and what you're being told. That there is always a key golden nugget in there.
Two pieces of clear, cogent and concise advice that you can all take away and apply wherever you're going back to when you finish here. So thank you to these guys. Please join me in thanking them.